Before we start, as we always do, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where we gather across Queensland and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the important roles that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples play on the lands, skies and waterways that are used for outdoor activities. I'm in Brisbane, or Meanjin, on Yagara country, which is a place of the Jagera and Turrbal peoples. If you'd like to, you can pop in the chat the place and the country that you're joining from today. And we also acknowledge the funding provided by the Queensland Government, which supports outdoor activities across the state, and acknowledge the work that government departments and ministers do and have done regarding outdoor activities, including sport and rec within the Department of Tourism, Innovation and Sport. So welcome to another session of Coffee and Conversation. My name's Dom Courtney. I'm Executive Officer of Outdoors Queensland. Our Operations Manager, Mark Squires, is my regular co-host and is here today again.
Good morning.
Welcome to everyone. Whether you're members of Outdoors Queensland or others, you're more than welcome to join us. As I said earlier, the recordings will be on the website and on YouTube. So just want to let you know that. This is the 5th scheduled episode of Coffee and Conversation for 2022. And I'm really pleased to advise that I'm back at the Outdoors Queensland office at Milton. So power was restored to our building last week, which was great. And I just wanted to, do a big thank you to all the people who would have been involved in restoring electricity to our office and getting it back up and running. And it's probably more people than we actually think. So I just wanted to make that public vote of thanks, because it's nice to be back in the office, even though some of us are still working from home predominantly. So it's another big fortnight since the previous session on the 4th of March. The recovery from the extreme weather event that struck so many areas in particularly southern Queensland a few weeks ago. Also further information about COVID-19 and some other opportunities, including the outcomes of the Outdoors Queensland AGM, which is held on Wednesday. So as I said, if anyone wants to add extra topics as we go along, Gavin's already flagged one. More than happy as we go along, we'll come to those. So I just wanted to give you a bit of an update after the Outdoors Queensland AGM, firstly. So we had some changes to our board. So former directors Alana Bold and Ross Barnes have stepped down. Alana was on the management committee of Corf and the board of Outdoors Queensland for 9 years, and Ross has been on for the last 2 years, and we do thank them for their service over those periods. Alana actually served as president for the last 3 years as well. So Andrew Critter Boyle is the new president of Outdoors Queensland. He's a former president of Corf, and Peter Gould's vice president, as it says there, and there's a list there. And I just wanted to highlight particularly Beck Fox and Fiona Coppin, who've joined the board as of Wednesday evening. So the reason I highlight that is, the directors of the organisation are responsible for setting the strategic direction of our organisation, and they also oversee the way we operate to achieve the mission of the organisation, which is that all people have opportunities to make connections with Queensland's outdoors. So I guess an important part of that is that people know who the directors of the organisation are, but also, it's another opportunity for you as members or potential members to know who is actually, on the board and who you can contact if you'd like to. You can always contact myself and Mark and the other staff, but also the board are an important part of our team. So just wanted to flag that, and congratulations to the continuing board members, but also our new board members, and it'd be great to work with them. Another outcome from the AGM was that Ian Heath was elected to honorary life membership of Outdoors Queensland. So he was nominated by Scouts Queensland. And in accordance with the Constitution, the board considered his nomination and then agreed to refer it to the members for consideration during the AGM. And Ian was unanimously elected to life membership. Ian was the Scouts Queensland rep to Corf for many years. He served on the Corf Management Committee and the Outdoors Queensland board for, I think, 16 and a half years, and has been involved with scouting since he was 8 years old and is still involved. So he's done a lot for outdoor activities in general, and he's also got an OAM. So he's a wonderful person to join our the honorary life membership group. We have Ian's the 7th life member appointed by the organisation. So these joins John Wood, Donna Little, Dave Batt, Brian Cross, Rob Simpson, and Kelly Kingswood. So yeah, it's nice to have Ian in that group now. So congratulations to Ian. If there's any questions as we go along, please feel free to sing out too. I also just wanted to highlight the annual report. It's been presented at the AGM. Will be available on our website as well. We did a bit of a one-page snapshot of the annual report, which I've sort of split in half there for you, so you could see it on a landscape screen. It seems a long time ago that we did all this stuff during 2021, but I think it's always a good opportunity to formally reflect on what we achieved. And there was a lot of input from people on this call and so many other people, so I do thank you for that. We also discussed during the AGM what's coming up for Outdoors Queensland and Queensland's outdoor sectors. We were lucky enough to have Andrew Sly, the Deputy Director General from the Department of Tourism, Innovation and Sport, join us, and he spoke at the AGM about the flood recovery, disaster recovery opportunities, but also about the Activate Queensland strategy. Andrew's also agreed to for us to share his presentation with the members, and we'll include that with a bit of an update from the AGM shortly. So there's a whole lot on there. I'm not going to read everything out on that screen, but I did want to say thank you. And particularly one of the things we highlighted there was we had over 450 attendees across 25 sessions of coffee and conversation last year. So a big thanks to everyone who contributed, which includes the Outdoors Queensland staff and board and our members, government officials, and others. So yeah, I just wanted to flag that. Any questions about any of those as we go along? As I said, it's a pretty small group, so if you have anything, please sing out. A couple of quick development opportunities. I've flagged this one in the past, the core cultural learning course that Savannah Guides is making available through the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australia Institute. I've chopped it off, I think. So IATSIS anyway, this online course. Mark and I have both done the course, as have some other staff, and we found it really valuable, and our newer staff are booked in to do the course this year. So it's open to anyone. You don't have to be a Savannah Guides member or an Outdoors Queensland member to do the course, but just contact them if you're interested in doing it. And they've got their, the Savannah Guides have actually got their field school in North Queensland happening at the moment. So we've missed the opportunity to attend that one, unfortunately, but yeah, that is happening as we speak, I believe. A couple of consultation opportunities. These are ones I've flagged in the past. The Currumbin Eco Parkland, it's going to be one of the biggest parks in Australia, and the community consultation's still open. I think it's going to close maybe the end of March, so it's worth having a look at that one if you're interested in that. And the other one there is the cultural heritage laws, Queensland cultural heritage laws. That's open right now as well and closes 31 March. So if you know of any community consultation opportunities, relevant to the outdoor sectors, feel free to let us know. I'm more than happy to share those, whether they're local or particularly statewide issues, which is really our remit. A couple of other ones I just wanted to flag. The Gambling Community Benefit Fund. That's got the super round, which closes 31st of March. One of the key things of that Gambling Community Benefit Fund is recovery from natural disasters. So obviously that will be quite popular, and I imagine it'll be heavily subscribed. That's particularly this super round, which will be very timely. So check the website for details about eligibility and availability of that. You do need to register to access the application form, and I'd recommend not leaving it to the last minute. We're more than happy to provide letters of support to our financial members. So if your organisation needs a letter of support, please let us know early with the details of the proposed project so we can do that. Applications close, I believe, 31st of March. There was some talk about it extending into April due to the recent flood, and I haven't checked on that. So, but yeah, it's worth checking their website. And there's also the Sport and Rec Disaster Recovery Program, and I'll speak more about that in a moment. We've got some more information on that, which Andrew shared with us on Wednesday evening, and I'll share that as well. And then the Fair Play vouchers, I think, is about to close. I think it closes next week. So yeah, so if you know of anyone who may be eligible for that, let them know. And there is a separate section where organisations can register to be a provider under that scheme, which you may want to consider for the future.
It's Tiani here.
Hey, Tiani.
That is correct. And also I'm not sure how many people online are eligible, but now I can't remember what the clubs program's called, but it closes next week as well.
It'll be Active Clubs.
Active Clubs, sure, it is called Active Clubs. Thank you.
If it doesn't start with active, I'm surprised it's not Active Fair Play vouchers, but yeah, so yeah, I should have flagged that one as well. Yeah, the Active Clubs round. Yeah. Thank you, Tiani. All right, a little bit about the world of COVID, and then we'll talk about some of the disaster recovery opportunities as we go along. So the Queensland roadmap for the COVID safe future, I think it might have been retired from use. I went having a look to see for an updated version of it this morning, couldn't find one, but so the Public Health and Social Measures Plan, which isn't quite as catchy a name, that infographic, that was updated on the 4th of March. It has the same new normal, which the roadmap has had for quite a while, which I've highlighted many times, but I think it's important to do that again, that, you know, the physical distancing, mask wearing, hand hygiene, staying home when sick, the Check In Queensland app, the vaccination and testing. The Check In Queensland app seems to, you know, they've wound back, eased some of the restrictions, but it still is in use for some venues across the state. So a bit of a slide about what changed 2 weeks ago, and some of you will be well aware of these. Density limits on venues and events removed. I'm not going to read out everything on the list there, but as Andrew's just flagged, short-term accommodation is no longer on the restricted businesses list. So they have updated the public health direction, and it's worth checking it out. And so there's other ones about the, as I said, the density limits, but some of them still have capacity restrictions. So for weddings, private hire of venues, and if there's unvaccinated people in attendance, there's a limit of how many people are allowed to attend. So, and there's still requirements, as I said, about the Check In Queensland app for some businesses like pubs and clubs, and they've got to keep using the app. So it's worth checking how that all works, but also that website at the bottom there has a bit of it's a Queensland Health website there with some more information on that as well. All right. And on vaccination requirements, I just wanted we haven't really spoken about the vaccination requirements for a little while, but it was a very hot topic late last year, early this year when the rules were being discussed and introduced. So the COVID-19 vaccination requirements for workers in a high-risk setting direction number 2 is the one that imposes the vaccine requirements for workers in high-risk settings. So that direction specifically includes schools and outdoor ed facilities, outside school hours care and vacation care, kindergartens, early childhood settings and family daycare providers in the definition of high-risk settings associated with early childhood, primary and secondary educational settings. So that's it. That's the extract on the screen there. Clause 7 of the direction specifically says it applies to workers in high-risk setting in public, private and non-government sectors. So it's broader than the education department, schools, or even the outdoor ed centres that are run by the education department. It's as long as, for our purposes, if it's an educational setting under the early childhood, primary and secondary, and they specifically exclude unis from that and TAFEs, unless the TAFE is co-located with a school, as it says on the screen, then it comes under that space. So yeah, that's probably the key thing there. The other one, the link at the bottom of the screen there, is a Queensland Health website which provides more information on the public health direction, and it's worth looking at that. And it goes on to talk about some of the rationale behind the reason for high risk settings being considered high risk, or the settings being considered high risk. So it's worth having a look at that website as well. I'd highlight that for everyone. Are there any questions on that or comments?
So Dom, Aaron, Lara, just quick question. Is there any scenario where if you're hosting a school camp at a venue that you could avoid these vaccination requirements? Do you think?
Well, if it's a school camp, I think it's an if it's an education setting, then and a school camp, like the direction specifically says outdoor education facilities. The only thing I can think of, which I think is still a grey area, and I actually think maybe it leans towards not being an outdoor education facility, is something like an expedition camp, where if it's taking place in a national park, say, where the kids are camping at remote campsites in a national park, I don't think the entire national park would be considered an outdoor ed facility just because a school camp takes place there, because that would have unintended consequences, such as all of the national park staff who work there would need to be fully vaccinated. That's surely not the intention of the public health direction. So that's about the only place I can see it where that may not be considered an outdoor education facility, which is also a educational setting. That sort of different type of thing. But if it's at an outdoor ed facility, it's clearly in the direction. So that's my take on it, Aaron. I think it probably is valuable for organisations if they're unsure about it to actually get advice, whether that's from Queensland Health or even legal advice on it, because it is important to make sure everyone's complying with the directions. But yeah, if it's a school camp, the only other thing I guess they could do is a school camp that's not at an outdoor ed facility, but I don't know how that would work. Maybe on a private property, just as a one-off, if it's not usually used as a school camp or an outdoor ed facility, maybe that's another opportunity on that. But maybe a school camp where they go to a farm or something like that, a property. but I think if it's generally used as an outdoor ed facility, it's in the direction.
Do you know, Dom, if they've started checking on places? Like, has anyone been audited yet?
I don't know of anyone who's had a unscheduled visit from Queensland Health to do that. I think they've probably had their hands full, and even with the impacts of the flood event as well recently, probably also. But certainly I know of venues who've requested Queensland Health to come out and do a site visit, particularly in 2020 and last year, where people invited Queensland Health to come out and check out the measures that they were taking. And those visits, I actually went to a couple of those. I went to the Queensland Rec Centre one at Curramundi, and also went up to QCCC at Mapleton with Andrew Grant, and they were really good visits. And I think, the Queensland Health people who came along were actually really impressed with a lot of the what they saw on the day, and I think some of what they took away was actually things, the way that some of the outdoor ed centres were operating, they were really impressed with, and they were thinking about how that could be applied elsewhere as well from the discussions we had. But I don't know of any random inspections in that space, and I'm not sure whether that's likely to happen. And Andrew's just added they're impressed with Alex Park too. Yeah, Danny mentioned that last year in Benoni, that they were really impressed there too, which is great to hear. Like I like hearing those sort of positive stories. Yeah, I didn't go along to the Alex Park one, which is why I didn't highlight it. But that's another opportunity too, to have Queensland Health come out and actually, check out the venue and the procedures. I just saw Benoni's. I need to come visit. I've been to your venue, Benoni. I haven't come to visit when there was a Queensland Health inspection. But yes, I've never knocked back a visit to Alexandria Headlands. I've spent a little bit of time in that locality. Thanks, Benoni. Any other questions on the world of vaccinations and the high risk settings direction?
This is just a comment that I think there's several of us who are aware of staff that we let go because they refuse to comply with the mandate, who are working at other venues. And yeah, we also have staff who work between venues and they hear different things from different venues.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be, like I say, there's some grey area there, but I think it is important for different operators for every operator to make sure they're operating in compliance with the public health directions, their legal directions. So it's just like any other law. You need to make sure your organisation's operating in accordance with it. You could have insurance ramifications. I don't know what else, but all I can say is, as we've said right from the get-go, everyone needs to make sure they're operating in accordance with the public health directions as well as all the other legal requirements. All right. I just wanted to flag as well the suspension of school camps. There's still work to be done in relation to the ramifications of the back to school plan. We've written to the government, seeking financial support on behalf of outdoor education operators. There's still more work to be done in relation to this, which we did ask, circulated a survey regarding the impacts of it. We haven't had a great lot of feedback on that, but we've extended the survey to 21st of March. And I fully recognise this last few weeks has been just awful. And I think everyone understands that. And people are busy with school camps resuming, but also have been impacted by this flood event. But the sooner we can get some more information, the better, so we can, try to make sure people understand that the impacts of the suspension of school camps during a peak period for outdoor education across Queensland. So Mark's just shared that survey as well. If there's any organisations that haven't done it and you're willing to do it, can you please do it for us before Monday when we close it off, and then we'll see where we go with that from there. But yeah, the more information we have, the better. You know, there are a few other things there, but I literally highlighted it on the screen, that completing the survey that we've circulated, which will help us to, you know, work with government in relation to this issue. And, you know, that's what we're trying to do. So really want to see what we can do there. So if you know of anyone who hasn't completed it, some of the people on the call have completed it, which is great, and thank you for that. But if you know of anyone who hasn't, maybe encourage them to do it if they're not on the call today. And the more information we have, the better we can present the facts of the matter. So thank you for that. Any other questions on that one? I just saw Andrew just put a comment. Response from MP so far to direct us to a website that isn't very helpful. Yeah, there's there is, you know, a range of general COVID support available, but what we've sort of been, I guess, seeking is actually targeted support that makes up for some of the impacts of the back to school plan, particularly for outdoor education providers. So it's a different kettle of fish to the general COVID support schemes that are out there, which are quite. All right, a few things on the severe weather event. Charlie's prepared a couple of extra social media tiles this week, very much along the lines of, as it says, take care when heading outdoors. Where obviously, you know, there are places reopening. There's still some places closed to recreation at the moment, which is understandable given the impacts of the recent weather event. I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, but the Commissioner of the Queensland Fire and Emergency Services was putting out a really good message about urging people to look up at trees and be careful of trees falling, because, you know, some trees have been undermined, and if it's windy, there are definitely going to be tree falls out there in the outdoors. So just reasons to be careful. The water quality issue is probably still an issue for some places, and conditions will have changed dramatically in some areas. So we just need to be careful. I think there's probably going to be some extra recce's, and there's probably already have been extra recce's done, particularly for outdoor ed operators, but also clubs. If you're planning, whether it's a bushwalk or a mountain bike ride, yeah, there is a whole lot of work that needs to be done in that space. I just saw Dave's question, expectation or standard for tree surveys. Dave, I can probably answer that a little bit from my past life when I worked in the as a recreation coordinator at SEQ Water, where we would get arborists in from time to time to do regular inspections of the trees in public areas, particularly. And generally, it's a risk management approach. So a lot of what the arborists actually, and I have to probably preface it that I haven't been in that space for a few years now because I've been in this role, but one of the approaches was about limiting unnecessary trimming of trees because they don't want to weaken the tree, but also that, you know, that it is a risk management approach. If there's trees that are near places where you think people would gather, such as, you know, a public park, that sort of thing, they probably need more attention than trees that are out along a trail. So that's the sort of stuff you need to do, but it is important. And the other thing is to protect your assets. If there's large trees, you know, near a shed or a building, you certainly should be making sure that you take a you manage that. Dave Maskell, hands up.
Hi everybody. Dom, I think there is a lack of the information you just gave is really accurate and up to date, but there's a lack of knowledge, I think, within the Southeast outdoor sector about tree checks for school camps particularly. It's a massive factor in Victoria. I work for OEG, and the period where they had a death in the field from a tree falling in a 1 in 100 year storm, which now occurs every 10 years. But I know when I go looking for information about, 6 or 10 principal dot points to give to my staff about tree checking, don't camp under trees, there's an obvious sort of common sense approach, but there are aspects of, don't fall under dead limb, don't camp under dead limbs, disturb soil, mold. And OEG actually created a massive, not a massive document, but a really good pro forma that they gave to staff as a checklist as a result of obviously the Ella Sloan incident. But that information is, again, held in silos, I think, within organizations and doesn't get shared around easily. I don't know where we could go with that. It's just a comment on the fact that when I'm looking for that stuff on the internet, I can't find it in an Australian context easily.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, thanks, Dave. And I just saw Dave Wood just actually, that's an ironic name now that I think of it, Dave. Frequency of arborist checks. It is, I'm trying to remember what we did at SEQ Water. Obviously, that was a government agency. I think it probably was done every 12 months in the parks areas, but it certainly wouldn't have been done that often across our whole trail network. That would have, you can't get an arborist to do that sort of stuff. But it's really based on a risk approach to it and how you manage it and what's reasonable. If you had a tree, I think anywhere near a building, you'd probably want to get it done maybe more often than others. It might be worth, maybe Mark and I have been talking about different topics. I haven't considered a visiting arborist, but we might see if we can line someone up to join one of these sessions and talk about it. Yeah.
Even the principle of, it's not even about not camping directly under the tree. You've got to actually estimate the fall zone in a high wind event. So, you might be 5 meters away, but if it's a 20-meter tree, it's still going to fall on your tent or potentially on your client's tents. So you've got to, is it the old Nazi salute trying to, I'm not going to do it, but to try and get the angle of 45 degrees from the top branch of the gum tree and then work out where and how far back you should be. And if you think about it in those terms, a lot of the campsites, both Queensland parks and privately owned ones, don't comply or potentially are something you need to really risk assess as an operator or as a commercial provider or as a school about where you're putting your tents, because people get killed every year camping in Australia under gum trees because they just randomly drop their limbs. Yep. So it'd be a great topic to discuss, or maybe one for the outhouse to take on as well.
Could be, yeah. We're just making more work for ourselves, but that's work that's important to be done. The other one on that as well is literally the whole thing of when you're considering those sort of things with the trees, there's more aspects than just a limb dropping as well. So it is an important point. So maybe that's one for the future as well. So thank you for that. But I guess it's even more exacerbated when the ground is saturated and we don't, you don't know what could happen there. Even on a clear day, sometimes a gum tree will drop a limb, and the type of tree is actually important to that as well, which is another thing that maybe we do need to develop some sort of ready reckoner, like you said, David, that OEG had, or have. So maybe that's another resource we could look into. All right. We also flagged that one about how people can support outdoor organisations, and that was really about, if you can't get out there right now, what can you do? So we wanted to flag that as well, just as a, put it out there that, there are opportunities for people to support clubs and other organisations from home as well, while they might not be able to get outdoors. So book a future adventure, that one always seems good to me. And a big thanks to Charlie for the work that she did on those social media posts, and she always does do a great job on those. I should acknowledge that more often, I think. Just a couple of slides. So as I mentioned earlier, Andrew Sly from Department of Tourism, Innovation and Sport, who's the head of Sport and Recreation. Andrew spoke during our AGM this week and gave us permission to share these slides from his presentation. So I've just got a couple of his slides on this. I don't know, Tiani, if you wanted to chime in anything, but I was really just going to mention what Andrew said on Wednesday about the department taking a lead role regarding the disaster recovery for the active industry, which obviously includes the outdoor sectors. And as it's got on those dot points, the on-ground support, the initial assessment assistance, and that sr.disaster, etc. Email inbox, and that's about reporting issues and that sort of thing. Again, the highlighting the safety side of things and the PPE, but the documenting of damage, and those regular industry meetings and the bulletins that Sport and Rec have been sending out, which we'll keep sharing with our networks. And I think Mark sent one out just this morning as well. It might have been yesterday, the latest one as well. So that's really been super valuable. And Andrew, it mentions it there. I think there's been a lot of learning from the Townsville event. The damage that was done there in 2019 was quite significant as well. So some of those systems are being used again to help inform this package of recovery. But importantly as well, funding and grant support. So that's what this slide's all about. And Andrew again said we could use this. So the three different funding options there on the right-hand side, they're actually cumulative. So if you're a non-profit organisation affected by a disaster in the declared local government areas, you might actually be eligible for all three funding options. So it could be a total of up to $75,000. If you apply for one, you can't apply for the others. You can apply for all three. The Queensland Rural and Industry Development Authority funding, that's available for small business and non-profit organisations. So it's up to $50,000, and it has an initial grant of $15,000 to support your initial claim, and then a subsequent amount of $35,000 for subsequent claims. So and they do need evidence, obviously, but these are, I understand, I haven't done it myself, but I understand the application process is not an onerous thing. These are aimed at getting money out the door so that people can recover. And that one's specifically aimed at both small business and non-profit, as I said. The last one there, the up to 20,000, which is joint between Department of Tourism, Innovation and Sport and Queensland Reconstruction Authority. And I understand that's joint funding from federal and state governments, which is great. Andrew also flagged on Wednesday that it's expected there'll be additional disaster recovery funding available beyond this. So I think Andrew pointed to the picture there on the slide. I think that's a artificial football soccer field. I think I'm right there, Tiani. But he said that one's quite new, and I think it's over $1 million worth of damage estimated just in that photo.
That picture is actually the one of the Townsville hockey fields, but it's a very similar story for the Mitchelton Football Club. It does look like that as well.
Oh, that must be where I'm getting. Yeah, it's probably got a different background. That mountain does look Townsville-ish. Thanks, Tiani. But yeah, it must have been the Mitchelton one Andrew was talking about that has a ridiculous amount of damage as well, which obviously $75,000 is not going to go very far to fix. So it is expected there'll be further funding available as the full picture emerges of the impacts of this disaster. So yeah, and thanks, Tiani, did you want to add anything on any of that?
Yeah, thanks, Dom. Just a few tiny things. The $20,000 grant funding, that one is sort of up above and beyond the 50 and the 5. So if you have damage that's more than 55 and you're eligible, or 50 if you're not a not-for-profit, then you're not eligible for the first one, but you may be eligible for the second. And then the third comes in over the top of that. I guess one of the things that we're trying to still collate information on is the quantum of the disaster for sport and active recreation. So if there's anyone on the call, or Dom, maybe you have this through your network anyway, if there's any place that you know that has had significant damage, our infrastructure team are more than happy to come out and do some recording as well, and to try and we're trying to get a good quantum so that when we go back to the feds and work on what additional support, we've got some good figures to undertake that activity.
Terrific. Thanks, Tiani. There. I just noticed in the comment about funding increase to reflect, you know, the actual impact on, you know, what's happened as a result of the disaster. So yeah, it is an important piece of work, I suppose, that's going to happen. I think there is, obviously it relates back to the school camp operation as well, but you know, we need to make sure we can get as much as possible reconstructed and up and running so people can use these outdoor spaces as soon as they can. Dave, did you have a comment on that as well?
Dom, it's an allied thing. Worked at a hard top in New South Wales, had 400 beds, and it was in the Blue Mountains where all the fires are, and that site ended up hosting the fireys and all their support for a number of weeks, and the government reimbursed the site. But is that done in Queensland? Would SES or the fireys or whatever have sort of reserve sites pegged if they needed, you know, evacuation centres? Do any of the campsites, are any of the campsites on that list?
I don't know of any. Does anyone on the call know the answer to that question?
Yeah, we hosted fireys at Tamborine in 2019 during the bushfire disaster down that way. So yeah, it does happen, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's great that we can. We're talking, I guess, contributing, and that also means it's actually pretty handy having those sort of services, actually being aware of your venue, just in case they're needed there, but also so that, you know, just as far as giving back to the community, to be able to host them there is really good. So yeah, thanks, Dave. It's a good point. I just wanted to flag a few other resources in addition to the ones I just flagged. Check out local government. I know Brisbane City Council, but also other local governments have got different grant schemes available right now, as does the federal government and obviously state. I attended the Active Queenslanders Industry Alliance webinar, which was 2 Tuesdays ago. It was aimed at clubs affected by the flood crisis, and the recording's available on their website. Mark's just shared the link there. Also, that the Outdoor Council of Australia guidance note, that's not about recovery, it's about planning for activities and development of activity management plans. So it's not a response resource, but it might be worth your while revisiting that document just in light of another extreme weather event, which we've experienced. Dave, is that another hand up or was it the same question? Just glanced over.
Sorry, I've got to take it away.
Thanks, mate. Just thought I'd better check. The other one I did, the volunteer opportunities, I left that there. The Mud Army 2.0 was actually stood down in Brisbane after contributing, and I know they did a lot of work there. I registered for it and didn't get the call up. I was a bit disappointed. I didn't get drafted. I'm not sure why. But there's still plenty of opportunities to help people out, like right now. So whether that's a club or individuals in your neighbourhood, you know, I think it's worth having a think about that if you are able to contribute. And obviously acting locally in your neighbourhood is a really good feeling. So it might be, you might get as much out of it as the people you're helping do. And just on Tiani's point earlier about sharing photos and stories of flood damage, we've had some outdoor operators share, you know, that information with us, and some of it's really awful, you got to say, but it's also amazing to see some after photos showing recovery, which is already underway, which is great to see. But if anyone wants to speak about that, I'm happy to open the floor to you now, or you can always contact us later with some of that information as well, or through Sport and Rec, as Tiani said, that the department's trying to get the full picture of what that looks like. Does anyone have any tales like that? As long as they're not all awful tales, they can be, if that's what's happened to you. But does anyone want to speak to that? No takers. All right. I'm going to get on my soapbox again. We mentioned this a fortnight ago that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released its 2022 assessment report, which warned of impacts from extreme events such as floods. And that fact sheet for Australasia, it specifically talked about impacts on ecosystems, impacts on human systems, which is all interrelated. Outdoors Queensland does recognise climate change, the impact of that on outdoor operators in our strategic plan. And I guess the question that comes out of that is really what we can do about climate action. It always seems like such a big topic. I actually stole a few points from the Climate Council's list of climate actions people can take, whether in their personal lives or their professional lives. And that first one there, you know, understanding climate news and developments, you know, it's not always easy, but there's a lot going on in our lives. But if we want to see climate action, we need to understand, you know, what's going on in that space, I guess. The second one there that the Climate Council talks about is using your voice to pressure governments. And I think it's really about letting the elected officials know that you're serious about action on climate change. Again, that's a pretty simple thing to do, but you sort of think how often do we actually email an MP to let them know how we feel about this issue or other issues? The third one is about where your finances are invested. And they highlight that many banks and financial institutions, including superannuation funds, invest in fossil fuel projects, which obviously the Climate Council isn't a big fan of. And they suggest that people should make informed choices about where to invest your money, which may put pressure on financial institutions to do better. And they've actually got a link on their website that lets you check specific banks or other financial institutions on how they invest, which is interesting. The other one they talk about is rooftop solar, switching to clean energy providers, and changing the way you travel. One of the things they highlight is consider public transport, carpooling, and of course cycling and walking, which won't surprise too many people on this call. And the bottom one they said there was consider an electric vehicle if you're buying a car. And I think the Queensland government just announced this week an increase in the rebate on electric vehicles. So there seems to be a bit of action around that as well. So I just wanted to highlight that. Happy if anyone has any comments, whether they're additional information or different opinions, but I just wanted to highlight those as things that can be done in our personal lives or even professional lives as well. A few reminders. Inside the outhouse, Dave, did you want to give us an update on, is Dave Maskell still with us? Maybe he's dropped off. Anyway, inside the outhouse, I think the next one is the first Monday of April, which is a bit scary that we're approaching April. Also wanted to highlight those resources, our websites, our e-bulletins, and our social media channels. Obviously that, you know, reminder about taking care when we're heading outdoors, which sparked the discussion earlier. And it's not just about trees too in that, you know, there's other things such as wildlife on the move, water quality, potential water quality issues still, and also checking what areas are and aren't open, particularly through the land and water managers' websites and their social media channels. It's well worth checking before you go. And also the fact that conditions may have changed quite significantly in that space. That pretty much brings us to an end. Gavin, you flagged earlier if you wanted to raise a bit of an update on a couple of things, and I saw you made a comment in there earlier about the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail too. Did you want to speak to those?
Yeah, with the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail, there was significant damage along the whole length of it, and TMR are out surveying it and doing as much as they can for repairing. The worst part is around Kooyar Creek at Yarraman, which sustained a lot of damage. So yeah, so people be aware that when they get on the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail, there are sections still closed and that. With the Boonah Wristbridge Trail, the Logan City Council, we flagged an issue with them where a person had built on the actual trail, and because their property, because the actual route goes through the middle of their property, and they weren't aware of it. So we contacted Logan Council, and Logan Council have visited the people, and they, because they weren't aware of it, they're now going through remediation to remove the property and then get surveyors actually mark that as a public road for the Boonah Wristbridge Trail. So that's a good outcome, and we're hoping that they might actually look at the other parts of it too, going through down to the Warpig Creek. So
excellent. Yeah, I guess it also highlights the need to get surveyors in before you build a building if you're not sure of where the property boundary is. But yeah, you feel sorry, I guess, for someone who's built a building without knowing that there's a gazetted road through their property. But it's also about protecting the future connections for recreation use.
Yeah. And we've decided, because Inland Rail's been delayed, that we might just push forward with the original route, and then deal with Inland Rail when that goes through the area.
Yeah,
just
so they've had a delay because of their environmental impact and community impact study. I think that's correct, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So the EIS has been delayed 12 months, and so they've been held off. Bushwalking Queensland is now involved with the Escape of the Scenic Rim Festival in May, and so we put on a walk on the Boonah Wristbridge Trail from Warralong down to Boonah, the sections of the Great Escarpment Trail between Boonah and the Boonah Border Gate, and also Steve Finlayson from National Parks and Wildlife at Main Range. He wants us to open up what's called Rampart Lagoon, which is a walk from Arachula into the base of the cliffs of Main Range through a big lagoon.
Wow, excellent. Yeah. We're certainly going to promote the Scenic Rim Festival, or the Escape in the Scenic Rim. But yeah, if you want us to promote those particular walks, Gavin, we'd be more than happy to do that if you send us through some details. So yeah. Terrific.
And the Great Escarpment Walk itself, I've actually approached UNESCO. I'm waiting for a reply back because it links World Heritage areas. It can actually get backing of UNESCO to be a UNESCO trail.
Wow. That'd be fairly impressive, mate. And I imagine the one you mentioned through the lagoon would be pretty cool too.
Yeah.
So that's all in the long weekend in May, isn't it? Of the Labor Day long weekend.
No, they're the 14th of May, the 15th of May, 22nd of May, and the 29th of May.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. The festival goes for a month this year. Yes. Yeah. But the Mount Barney section of it is the Labor Day
long weekend. Yeah.
Sorry.
And I've decided not to have anything on Mother's Day.
Oh, surely that's an opportunity for the mothers to either send their family off for the walk or go on a walk themselves. Surely that's a wonderful thing to do with your family.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, thanks, Gavin. Please send us through some info on all of that, and Mark can definitely share that with our network if you're looking to promote it. And I know the Scenic Rim Council are certainly keen to have.
Yeah. Another thing too is the Boonah Border Gate, which is in Carilla National Park in New South Wales. has actually been flagged by the management plan to actually remove all the infrastructure to do with the tick gate house and everything. So we're putting forward a proposal that a campground be established on the border there.
Oh, right. I might be interested in, if the COVID restrictions come back in, you could maybe camp in one part of the campground and not the other. If you cross the border, you get in strife. But yeah, that sounds good. Yeah. Well, let us know more about that one too,
Yeah.
Gavin, if you get a chance. But yeah, it's good to see Bushhorn Queensland really getting involved in those sort of projects. So well done, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Does anyone else have any other news or topics to suggest for future? You can always suggest them later on, but yeah, if not, we might wrap up here and everyone can have an early lunch. But thank you very much for coming. Don't forget about the resources on our website. A big thanks again to Mark for co-hosting today and all the work he always does, particularly for the AGM as well. Mark certainly kept things working along there, did a lot of work in the lead up to the AGM as well. Our next session's the 1st of April. So I'd just like to encourage you to look after yourselves, look after others, and look after the planet. Thanks again for coming.